Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. 5 biggest questions for the Florida Gators heading into the 2024 season, and very similar to the conversation that we had about breakout players for the Florida Gators. I think these are kind of some of the most important conversations to have about this Florida program where, we've been pretty vocal that this team on paper, it has the talent. Like, it's in the blue chip ratio. It has the talent to be extremely dangerous in the SEC. You just got to see it happen on the football field in 2024. And at least my mind, if Florida can answer these 5 questions that we're going to talk about, you're going to see a very dangerous Florida Gators team in the 2024 year. And again, it's not that we're getting up here and picking Florida to win an SEC championship, but this is a team that can make some serious noise in 2024 if some of these questions do in fact get answered. Before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys, to the Florida Gator fans. It's been a blast talking this program, whether we're previewing 2024, talking about the recruiting trail. Appreciate you guys more than you know for rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, I would love to hear some of your answers to these questions in the comment section. A lot of different ways you could go about answering these questions. Would love to hear from you guys. And without further ado, let's start with at least the number one question for me. And this is kind of a 3-part question. We're going to blend these first 3 questions together. And I think it starts with, does Graham Mertz get off the leash in 2023 or 2024? That is, excuse me. You go back to the 2023 season, Graham Mertz was top 5 in the country in completion percentage. Now, that being said, you look at Graham Mertz and say he wasn't really asked to push the ball down the field all that often. That was probably one of the fatal flaws that Florida had in the 2023 year, was just not making defenses respect what they could do attacking down the field. Now, Graham Mertz, when he had the opportunity to push the ball down the field, was very effective, right? Completed 41% of his footballs 20-plus yards down the field. I think the problem was his average depth of target was only 6.7 yards down the field, and only 10% of his attempts were going 20-plus yards down the field. Now, you kind of ask the question, is Graham Mertz going to get let off the leash? I think it's contingent on 2 other things. I think the Florida Gator fans kind of said this in the comment section. I think it makes a ton of sense. One, does the pass protection get better? I think we know that Graham Mertz is a quarterback that can attack the deeper third, push the ball down the field. That being said, in 2023, it's awfully hard to push the ball down the field consistently when you don't have an offensive line that can hold up in pass protection. You look to attack the deeper third. You got to let those routes develop down the field. This Florida Gators offensive line it wasn't really capable of holding up from a protection standpoint to allow this Florida offense to push the ball down the field. I think one of the biggest, if not the biggest question mark for Florida is, does the offensive line get better from a pass protection standpoint? And I think there's a lot of reason to believe it does. Now, we don't need to dig into what we saw in 2023, but you look at some of the numbers: 126 quarterback pressures. Graham Mertz sacked 9.3% of his dropbacks. That was 115th in the country. Florida fans know that it is hard to win a lot of football games in the SEC when you can't win at the line of scrimmage. Florida could not do that in 2023. What does Billy Napier and this coaching staff do? I think they bring in 2 really intriguing offensive tackles, right? Brendan Crenshaw-Dixon, who I think we all kind of feel like is a lock to start at that right tackle spot for the Gators. And I think just the mere fact that Damian George kicking in the guard, that's massive for this Florida offensive line. We talk about 126 pressures given up. 30 of those pressures were from Damian George. It was a massive problem in 2023. You also bring in Devin Manuel, who I think has some really serious upside. And so you kind of look at the tackle position and say, we got 3 tackles that we feel pretty comfortable about heading into the 2024 season. Where you go back to the 2023 season, I think there was probably 1 offensive tackle that Florida felt good about. That was Austin Barber. It certainly didn't feel good about Damian George. They kind of knew that he wasn't an SEC caliber tackle. They just didn't really have a choice. They had to put Damian George out there. So you look at the offensive line and say, you kind of feel like the pass protection is going to be better, which certainly is going to allow Florida to get more aggressive down the field in that passing attack. And now, I think one of the other conversations to have is, you look at the wide receiver room last year for Florida. Eugene Wilson, Ricky Pearsall, one of the better wide receiver duos that we saw in the SEC. That being said, both wide receivers that kind of excelled a little bit more, at least Eugene Wilson, in those short route trees. Ricky Pearsall more in the intermediate route trees. You kind of dive into some of the numbers. You didn't really have a wide receiver in this Florida Gators offense last year that could be a threat down the field. You look at Eugene Wilson's average depth of target was 2.8 yards. You look at Ricky Pearsall, it was 11 yards. You look at Arlis Boardingham, it was only 5.8 yards. They just didn't really have that pass catcher that could operate down the field successfully. I think one of the questions going into the 2024 season is, do they have a wide receiver that can emerge as your deeper third threat? The way I look at this wide receiver room is you have Eugene Wilson, a guy that you want to get the football to in space as much as you can, a guy that's going to excel in those short intermediate route trees. I think you have Elijah Badger, kind of a very similar conversation. I think the question is, what wide receiver is going to emerge to complement what Badger and Wilson do and can attack the deeper third? Because if you have a wide receiver that can do that, that's going to create a lot more space for guys like Eugene Wilson and Elijah Badger to work underneath in those intermediate route trees. I would ask the Florida Gator fans, I would love to hear your feedback in the comment section. And what guy is it going to be? I think Aiden Mizell certainly could be that guy. We all know he's a blazer in terms of vertical speed. He's got a nice frame. I think going into year two, there's a lot of reason to be optimistic about Aiden Mizell. You look at him back as a true freshman, I think he struggled to deal with contact off the line of scrimmage, was a guy that probably needed a year within a college football program to kind of build the frame and physicality that it takes in the SEC. I think going into year two, he still has the frame. He still has the speed. Now he might have a little bit of more of that size and physicality and nuance in terms of creating separation down the field. Aiden Mizell certainly could be that candidate. I think another guy that kind of just gets overlooked is Tremere Dike, and I get it's not necessarily the flashiest addition in the transfer portal. You go back to Tremere Dike at Wisconsin, especially with Graham Mertz. This was a guy that his average depth of target was 15 and a half yards down the field. I mean, Tremere Dike is a guy that can stretch teams vertically down the field. He kind of gives you that high floor. Like if Aiden Mizell needs another year, you can rely on Tremere Dike to be that kind of wide receiver. And if Florida finds a guy like Dike to step up, I know some people are massive fans of Khalil Jackson or Marcus Burke. I mean, you got some names that can kind of emerge and do that role. If you find a wide receiver that can be a threat down the field, it's going to help Graham Mertz push the ball down the field. It's going to help Eugene Wilson and Elijah Badger have some more space to operate underneath, and it's going to help the run game. I mean, you look at Florida's offense last year with such a low average depth of target, it seemed like so many defenses were just playing downhill on them. When you don't have that ability to make safeties and secondaries respect what you can do vertically, it's just the space gets so condensed. And I feel like that was a massive problem for Florida in 2024 or 2023. That is, if they can find a wide receiver that can emerge as that guy, I think that's a massive storyline. So if the pass protection gets better, if you can find some wide receivers that can work vertically down the field, the leash is going to be off Graham Mertz. I think we know Graham Mertz is a top-end quarterback in the SEC. We're going to have the ability to treat him like one in 2024. I think going to the fourth question, I want to talk about the pass rush. And I think what I want to talk about is who's going to emerge as that elite pass rush threat, specifically coming off the edge. You look at last year, it was Princely Youp. There was no question about it. Led the team in sacks, led the team in quarterback hurries. The number 2 quarterback hurry manufacturer for Florida last year was Caleb Banks on the inside with 19 quarterback hurries. Had a phenomenal year for Florida. Kind of a quiet year, but a sneaky good year, I should say, from Caleb Banks. I look at the inside of the defensive line and say Cam Jackson, Caleb Banks. I think Joey Slackman's going to give some really big-time pass rush juice from the inside. I think the question is who's going to replace some of the edge production that you saw from Princely U in 2023. A couple different names. One, Tyreek Sapp, another guy that kind of under the radar played some really good football. Justice Boone coming back from injury certainly could be a guy. And then you have some of the young cats, right? Cam James, TJ Searcy, Kelby Collins, who's going to work kind of all along the defensive line, and 5-star LJ McCray. Like, there are some names that you feel pretty good about emerging for Florida. I think that's just a massive question, is who are going to be the names that can kind of take over a game and really get after the passer, with Princely U moving on to Ole Miss. I think the last question you got to talk about is creating turnovers. You talk about playing winning football, something that Florida just did not do in 2023. One is taking care of the football. Graham Mertz did a phenomenal job taking care of the football. Now the downside was this Florida defense didn't manufacture any turnovers, right? Only 0.6 turnovers per game. That was 128th in the country. I think the more surprising number, 3 interceptions all year for the Florida Gators. You didn't have a single defensive back with more than 1 interception in the 2023 year. 3 interceptions. That's the lowest number I've seen since we've kind of started doing this. And I think what's so confusing is you look at Austin Armstrong back at Southern Miss in 2022, check my notes here, 17 interceptions for that Southern Miss defense. So can Austin Armstrong, who has that brand of playing aggressive defense, we're going to try to create turnovers and create negative plays. Can you find those negative plays and turnovers more consistently in 2024? Again, this is a Florida team that is searching how to play winning football. Creating turnovers, those game-changing plays, that's how you play winning football. They just didn't do it in 2023. Now, where are the turnovers going to come from? You're bringing DJ Douglas. He had 3 interceptions last year. You're bringing Asa Turner, 6 interceptions on his career. You have some young, talented cornerbacks and safeties, right? Jordan Castell, Bryce Thornton. You're bringing some experience in Asa Turner, DJ Douglas. Jason Marshall had his hands on plenty of footballs in 2023, just really couldn't make any plays from it. You have a guy in Devin Moore who we think played really good football towards the end of his year. Sharif Denson, another young cat that played some good football against Florida State. I look at the defensive back room and say it's talented. And I think going into year 2 with all these young cats getting a little bit more experience, you bring in some experience in the transfer portal with Austin Turner, DJ Douglas. And I think most importantly, just going into year 2 with Austin Armstrong, the turnovers are going to come, in my opinion. I don't think it can get worse than what Florida had in 2023. Can you be that defense that we envisioned when Austin Armstrong was coming in? That's the question mark. I mean, if this is a Florida team that can just find 2 turnovers per game from 0.6, that is a massive, massive difference in some of these games. And you start thinking about how many games Florida lost within the margins, right? Missouri on the road or Arkansas at home. There were games that Florida certainly could have won if 1 or 2 plays go their way. And they just didn't create many of those game-changing, game-winning kind of plays. Can they do that on defense in 2024? It's a massive, massive storyline for Florida. If you get the answers to these questions, right? If Graham Mertz gets better pass protection and gets a wide receiver that can work vertically down the field, the leash comes off Graham Mertz and he plays like one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. And then on the defensive side of the football, you see some young development really take place in 2024. Guys that are going into year 2, year 3 within this program, put it on the field, create some more turnovers. This is a team that can be dangerous. I think we all know that. We just got to see some of these questions get answered for this Florida program. This is a team that excites me. Like it could be a really fun season for the Gators. We'll close it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Would love to hear some answers from you guys in the comment section, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.